Thank you so much for doing this. What a year. We are looking at the end of a crisis that we've lived with for a generation.
Looking at it.
We are looking
You
at
can almost taste it. It's not there yet. And that's really what today's all about. It is possible now. The science has caught up with our faith that the end of this pandemic, the greatest health crisis in 600 years, is possible if we stay with it. There's budget cuts, there's terrible times out there in America, but actually right now it's possible to turn the tide on this tiny little virus that's caused so much heartache and destruction, and America needs to know what it's already done, because it's stunning.
How did we get here?
Oh, I mean, amazing people. What do you, other activists, ACT UP, AMFARB, starting with the domestic before Keep a Child Alive. Who would you credit?
I mean, I think Clinton had a great influence, especially with the generic drugs, because they weren't available in the beginning, which is so much of what we were just talking about off camera when, you know, you guys were in Africa, and obviously when I was in Africa, you know, there were so many people who could not access the medicine. They were sick. Here it is available in where we live, where I live, where you live, but they could not unless you were very wealthy. So I think that was a big deal. So I think that it's incredible to see where we have come and the fact that so many people now can have access to it, but there's so many more that do not have access to it and need it. And what you spoke about before in regards to the science, I think that it's incredible for people who may not know to know that, you know, for there to be science that if you use treatment as prevention, if you are able to be treated, then 96% of the time you will not spread the virus. It's a tremendous breakthrough. That's a huge deal.
This is actually why we can say it's the beginning of the end of AIDS, because normally, for every one person that was treated, 2 were infected. But now, by getting these antiretroviral drugs to people early, as Alicia was just saying, and male circumcision's another thing, and also getting the drugs to pregnant women, they can slash the infection rate to under 1 person for every 1 person that's being treated.
We know it works.
Precisely
we just know it.
The end, and we know it works. And America has put 5 million people on these drugs. I'm not sure people know that. I mean, that is why we're on your program. We're on your program to thank you. And that sounds patronizing, but I'm not sure people are aware of this. This is probably the greatest act of courage, in my view, since the Second World War, what the U.S. has done here. President Bush, his historic AIDS initiative was $15 billion over 5 years. That was the turning point in the war. There was huge support on both sides, but he did that.
And it's such an important example, because you're going to Washington today at a time when, boy, the parties are so divided. It's about as sour an environment as you've ever seen. But on this issue, it's a perfect example, Democrats and Republicans coming together to solve a problem.
Yeah, I think that's why it's the most important thing. I think that's actually what's so hopeful about it, is the fact that this is a circumstance that no matter who you are, we can all agree that we want an AIDS-free generation. And I love the speech that Hillary Clinton made in reference to an AIDS-free generation, and the fact that we have the possibility to be the generation, to have a legacy that we can say we created an AIDS-free generation. We, all of us, because it's all of us that have to do it. It's not just the politicians. They can't do it without us forcing them and saying this is important to us. This has to happen. And the fact that we can see an end in sight, we must stand up and do that. So I think that's so important, the fact that we can say we can create that, and that's a hopeful feeling.
Yeah, because normally, you know, we're on your program and we're banging on about what feels like a hopeless situation. Today is different. This is really, it's so hopeful, and I know it's a corny metaphor. I've always used the moon shot. You know, when President Kennedy said we can, you know, put a man on the moon within the decade, but actually this is of that order, and it's like the eagle hasn't landed yet. It's just hovering. But if we want it, It will happen.
It's so funny you bring that up. I was talking to a leading AIDS researcher this morning who was working on a cure for AIDS. And he talked about when he was asked this question 20 years ago, he said, boy, if we just put $5 billion in it, could we reach the moon? He would say, we don't even know where the moon is. But now we know where it is, we can see it, and we're moving in that direction. That is a big change.
Unless this recession scuppers the whole thing. And, you know, there are people begging for cuts. And we know why, and we understand. And it's very important to communicate that it is a tiny, tiny percentage of government spending, less than 1%, that all these development stuff comes out of.
All foreign aid, not just
all
AIDS.
foreign aid, at less than 1%. And you have millions and millions and millions of lives. And if you ask the military, you know, they will tell you this is a national security issue for them. They want the world to know what America stands for as well as what America stands against. I've had generals call me, Jim Jones called me at home. I went to the Pentagon as was brought there by Secretary Gates, which was an odd one, rock star. You can imagine. I don't know if you've ever been in the Pentagon. It was, wow, that was a head trip. And he was there going, this is important for America. And it's people think it's a much bigger number. And I think if we can just get the idea across that cuts, you know, we know they're happening, but cuts can't cost lives. I would just appeal to that. That's the, you know.
Are you getting pushback when you talk to members of Congress with that argument?
I had some courageous stuff happen. People stood up on Congress and stood by this cuts can't cost lives thing. But they're getting a lot of pressure. It's really up to the people of America, as Alicia was saying. If they give them the permission, the politicians will do it. That's why Alicia does this premiere that we did the other day, and
keep a child alive.
Keep a child alive. It's keep a child in the news, you should call it. Keep you know, it's why product red is in mouth, and you know, Apple. Today, every Apple store is going to be lit red, and people wearing red T-shirts. They've I think it's nearly 50 million, they've contributed to the Global Fund, Apple. Coke today come on board. Can you imagine a more American iconic company? They are, but Muhtar Kent is born on World AIDS Day today. Wow. It's his birthday, so he's the CEO of Coke. So, you know, it's good news.
It is good news, and I think the most important thing in regards to speaking about how powerful we are as human beings, as people, and how much of a voice that we have, which I think sometimes we don't feel or understand the power that we do have as human beings. I think the most important thing to recognize is, like, when we talk about the beginning of the end of AIDS, and we speak about the fact that there are 50% of mothers. Let's speak about mothers. I'm a new mom. You know, I have a 1-year-old, and he's spectacular. And I know as a mother, you know, when I was pregnant, how worried I was about his every health. Is he going to be okay? How is he going to feel? Is he growing okay? And imagine being an HIV-positive mother and the worry and the concern, and on top of that, not being able to have the medicine that you know would be able to save your child from being born HIV. And you could, as an HIV-positive woman, have an HIV-negative child with this medicine and this treatment. And I think that it's really important to feel the fact of the humanness of it. You know, it's a human being, a life, you know, and also the victory of the fact that if we have reached 50% of mothers who are pregnant and have been able to give them access to treatment, if we are able to reach the other 50%, how many babies would be born HIV-free?
That was the most bittersweet thing of when we went back to Soweto back in 2002. They were just starting to treat some of the moms, but it was a small island.
You remember that, George, because we did, I think it was 2002, we were together in Africa, and it was it's the look in the eyes I'll never forget, because it's the strangest look when you see somebody diagnosed HIV and there's no treatment. So it's, you know, and you'd think it'd be anger, you'd think it would be, you know, there'll be resentments, but it's just not. It's just acquiescence, and that is heartbreaking, you know. And then the medical staff would be angry because they knew it was just an accident of geography. That if you lived in Dublin or New York, this was not a death sentence. And I think that sort of turned my world upside down on this. It sort of, it begat all kinds of existential questions about whether, our system, globalization, we get a lot of the benefits of globalization, but are we, surely there needs to be some responsibilities come with that. And so it's been a huge challenge, and people said it wouldn't happen. There was a head of USAID at the time, I probably shouldn't say this, but there was a quote, "Africans don't have wristwatches." Do you remember that quote?
They're not going to be able to figure out
how would they be able
drugs.
to take their drugs?
Wow.
And then a genius a hero of mine, Paul Farmer, of ours, in Haiti, had proved, actually, poor people are better at following their drug regimens than people in the West, and or rather in New York and Dublin. So, I mean, it's been a long, hard road.